All right. I see people are kind of starting to log on, but we'll go ahead and start. You can join in. But welcome to those of you guys who are here. Thanks for joining us with this virtual career seminar through VESS. For those of you who are on the call who are actually unfamiliar with who VESS is, we are the premier national vascular society geared towards early career vascular surgeons, facilitating networking, collaboration, and of course, fun during our annual winter meeting where we combine science and skiing. And so with all of that in mind, we wanted to host a seminar that would benefit those of you who might be about to enter the job search or in the thick of it now, and those who may be considering other jobs or early or practice environments, those of you who are early career or mid. So we have a great panel of vascular surgeons from all across the country, and this list was intentionally curated to incorporate surgeons in different practice environments who span the spectrum from early to late career, academic to private practice, military, those who may have changed jobs in the past, so they can offer kind of a wide perspective to all of you. I have some common questions and conversation topics to start it off, but there's a Q&A feature that you should be able to put questions into that we can get to and kind of address any questions you guys come up with. So feel free to chime in there. And then, if you're addressing it to any particular panelist, that's great. Otherwise, panelists can feel free to chime in with whatever kind of whichever question they feel comfortable answering. And so I think we'll just start it off. I think there may be a couple more panelists trickling in. A couple people are caught up in the operating room, but if we want to go through each person and just kind of tell us where you're from, where you practice, what kind of practice environment it is, what brought you there, and your interests, any interests in particular in vascular. So we can go ahead and start off. Why don't we start off with Laurel Hastings, Dr. Hastings?
Hi, good evening. I'm Laurel Hastings. I am from Colorado. I did my training at LSU, and I'm currently in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at Einstein. I'm an associate program director there. And this is my second job post-training, having come previously from private practice. My interests include pretty much everything in vascular surgery, but I have a special interest in carotid disease and CLI.
Awesome. And then we can move on to Garrietta Falls, Dr. Garrietta.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, my name is Garrietta Falls. I am a vascular surgeon in Cleveland, Ohio. I did my training in Los Angeles at Kaiser Permanente for general surgery residency. I was your traditional 5 and 2, and then did my fellowship at University of Massachusetts in Worcester. Currently, I live in Ohio. How I got here is kind of a long, drawn out story, but I started my first job after fellowship was private practice, felt I didn't quite fit in there, so I went back into academic medicine. Currently now at my third job at Metro Health in Cleveland, and it is, the place where I want to spend my career. Basically, we're a safety net hospital. We're affiliated with with Case Western University, and we see the gamut of vascular pathology here. So I'm more than happy to chat about that. And no particular vascular interest. I just like my job.
Awesome. All right, Dr. James Nuzzi.
Well, thank you to VESS for the opportunity to chat about my experiences. I'm about 4 years out of practice, originally from Michigan in the Midwest, did all my training out on the East Coast with a fellowship at Mass General, and then made my way out to UCSF. I'm currently 8/8 VA, so that's a full-time equivalent VA, and also 50% FTE at UCSF, which makes me 1.5 FTE. I also do research, so I'm technically 40% protected time research out of that. So you do the math, it doesn't all add up, but here we are. And my particular passion is in cerebral vascular disease and aortic disease, but I do a little bit of everything.
Awesome. And Dr. Nathan Aronson.
Hi, thanks for having me. I am at Maine Medical Center in Portland, along with Anna, who will tell you about herself in a moment. I'm one of 8 surgeons looking to hire our 9th, if anybody's looking to join us. I did my training, I'm a 5.2 graduate. I did my general surgery at USC in Los Angeles. I think Garrietta was at Kaiser, was my 4 when I was a 2 on trauma. And then I went to Mass General for my fellowship, and I was a couple of years ahead of James. And it's amazing to come on these things and see how interconnected and how small the world is of vascular surgery. Regardless, I have a special interest in complex aortic disease and carotids, but these days I like any bypass that stays open more than 30 days and endo cases that go well and those sorts of things. But thanks for having me, and look forward to talking to you all tonight.
Awesome. And then Dr. Danielle Setsko.
Hey everyone, sorry for being late. I didn't realize it was Eastern time, not Central, but I'm here now. Thanks for having me. I'm Danielle Setsko. I'm now in my 4th year of being an attending. I kind of lived all over the country growing up, and I did my training at University of Michigan in an integrated vascular program with Anna, actually, Dr. Ponikowski. And I finished in 2019, and my first job out was University of Alabama at Birmingham. So I'm down in Birmingham, Alabama at UAB. I have some protected time for research, and I just was finishing up on a VA research development grant. My passion research-wise is looking at chronic limb-threatening ischemia in patients that have end-stage kidney disease. Clinically, I like everything vascular, and at UAB, you kind of have to do everything because we're the only level 1 trauma center in the state. So we get all sorts of disasters, as I'm sure a lot of panelists get on this call as well. And I'm the associate program director for the residency program. So another big passion of mine is education and looking at competency-based education. Currently on one of the entrustable professional activities writing committees, which I think some of the panelists are on as well. So glad to be here.
All right. Awesome. And a couple more, if they trickle in, they can introduce themselves. I'm Anna Bonikowski. I am also from Michigan. I did everything in Michigan. I born and raised there, did my training there. I did an integrated vascular surgery residency, so the 0+5 program that included 2 years of research. And then from there in 2020, took my first job out of training at Maine Medical Center. My goals as what I was looking for as a new faculty was the opportunity to be around a variety of people from a variety of practice backgrounds, or at least training backgrounds, and people that could be really good mentors clinically and professionally for me. So Maine Medical Center was a good fit. I am the clerkship director for the medical students and the associate program director there as of now. So if anyone, I don't know if you guys, the attendees, are you able to type any Q&A? Is it working for you guys? I think because I'm a panelist, I can't see that I can type something in here, but feel free to just type in. And if the Q&A is not working, feel free to type in the chat. But I guess we can kick it off. One question that came up when we did this last year multiple times is, the question is, when you're looking for a job, how do you know if you want academic or private practice, and how do you know, what are the pros and cons of each? And is there anything that kind of steered any of you one way or another? And is there anything that you wish you knew prior to, making that decision? Anyone can chime in, so just feel free.
I can start. I think the big thing is figuring out what you want first. So there's a lot of different jobs out there, and coming out, I knew I wanted to be applying for K grants to eventually be an R-level funded researcher. And that route is completely different from someone that is not going to be applying for Ks. So when you're applying for Ks, you need protected time, probably 2 full days at least, where it's truly protected, at least during your first couple of years for writing the grants. Because once you get the grant, actually, it's probably you need less protected time. It's like actually writing the grant that takes the longest, and meeting with mentors and getting in that mentorship team kind of together. So I think ultimately you really got to have some introspection when you're about to graduate, probably a year before you graduate, about exactly what you want. You know, do you hate doing research? Then that's not for you. I think one thing that is a misconception is that academics is definitely a researching field where you have to have protected time and you're writing grants. There's a lot of academic jobs. I would say the majority of academic jobs, you know, you do dabble in kind of writing research papers, but they're not necessarily associated with grants, and maybe more clinical trial driven. And there's a lot of teaching where you're really in the operating room a ton, doing tons of RVUs. So it's almost like private practice, but you have trainees, and you may have some academic ventures on the side, but it's not every academic job is like, you know, 2 days of protected time. I would say that's the minority. And then if you want to just be clinically busy, just kind of follow your heart of what you really want, and don't feel like if you're coming from a big academic institution that you have to do that. At the end of the day, you got to do what makes you happy and your family happy.
Yeah. I know, I think a couple of you guys are academic. I know Garyetta, not to like put you on the spot, but I know you you were talking about the winding road you took to get where you are. So would you mind giving us some thought process into how you got where you are?
Sure. So when I was going through, my only goal was to get into private practice. I thought that I would enjoy the autonomy of being a private practice doctor, but I realized as I was coming out and I went into my first private practice job that I don't know anything about the business of medicine. You know, when we train to become doctors. We don't train to necessarily become businessmen. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with private practice. And my only advice, and you know, in that vein, would be, if you're considering a private practice job, you know, align yourself with a mentor who is private practice, who can kind of teach you the ropes. You know, I trained in an environment where I didn't have to count every Curlex roll that went out the door, or I, you know, didn't deny patient care because they couldn't do a copay. And then to suddenly be in that environment, it was very jarring. So I ended up leaving private practice and going back to kind of a more hybrid setting, where it was a community hospital that had an affiliation with major medical school, and I had residents and all of that stuff. And I found that was a better fit for me, because I still was that community doctor that I wanted to be, but at the same time I was, you know, heavily involved with teaching residents and, you know, doing research and other things like that. And I think, you know, you can find a job to fit you. When you first get out, you don't need to feel compelled to stick with the job, you know, no matter what. If it doesn't work, you know, there are many, many jobs out there, and you will find that fit for you.
Yeah. Awesome. There's a comment or question in the chat. Thanks for this. Oh, it disappeared. Wait, whoa. Oh, cool. So for those of you who are VA employees and have an academic appointment, how does your time map out in reality? Or, for example, are you working on research on weekends, etc.? It seems like that is a nice setup. Also, does your academic time outside of the VA, is it paid by your grants? Looks like, thanks, Dr. Sutsko, for answering it. Does anyone else, I think?
It's sort of halfway answered it, and I'm sure James, since he's 8/8, can answer it too. When I was on my research development grant, I got 2/8 of research time. So that basically paid for my Wednesdays to be fully protected for research. And my clinical time is Tuesdays and Thursdays. But I would say that clinical time at the VA usually ends at like 2:30 p.m. because everyone wants to go home. And so you can utilize that 2:30 p.m. until 5 p.m. to get a lot of your research stuff done. I would say if there's to the second point, academic time outside of the VA paid by your grants. So typically a lot of times if you're getting set up in an academic position for protected time, they like you to have VA-8s because it's easy to do research during that clinical time versus clinical time at the university. I think once that, if you're outside your VA time, you have to pay your salary somehow. So if you're going to have protected time for research outside the VA-8s, then you need grants to support that time. Because if you don't have grants, then you need to be generating clinical RVUs to cover your salary.
Yeah, our vice dean of faculty affairs always says there's no such thing as protected time. There's time you pay for one way or the other. So either you pay for it through grants, or you pay through it with clinical work. I think it can be a great, like Danielle said, you know, there's lots of time in the VA. There's, you know, downtime between cases. There's time afterwards. And the pressures are very different in the VA. No one's expecting you to hit a certain RVU count. So your productivity measures aren't quite as important as long as you're covering the care that's necessary to be done. And so I find there's lots of time where, you know, either we don't have cases or whatever, my partner's taking care of stuff that I have the opportunity to conduct my research. It's also a great place to conduct research because veterans are really highly involved and interested in giving back. And so it's easy to recruit people for your research as well, which I think is another big bonus for being at the VA. There's also additional VA grants that you have access to, which is particularly important. And many VAs have additional ways to fund your time, a couple of eighths, specifically for research as well. So you have lots of opportunities to get additional funding to support your work.
Awesome. I think one of our other panelists was able to pop on. Looks like he's driving though. So if it's not too Dr. Barkett, if it's not too distracting, would you mind just kind of introducing yourself? Just give us a little blurb where you're from, how you got to the practice environment and place that you are, and any particular interests you have in vascular.
Yeah, so figured this drive out without having to look too much, but I did the fellowship in Loyola in Chicago, and then I'm from South Louisiana. Ended up not going back to South Louisiana, but stopping halfway in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm part of a multi-specialty group of 40-something cardiologists, 3 cardiac surgeons, and about 2.5 of us that do vascular. One of them being a cardiothoracic surgeon, and we're part of a tertiary center. It's mostly centered on cardiovascular disease, and then interest-wise, and kind of the thing that lacked in Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is about, I'd say, 15 to 20 years behind most other states from vascular care, at least, was unfortunately now let's say complex aortic work, from the thoraco standpoint to the paravisceral going down. They had infrarenal covered in good and bad ways. So that's been my latest project the last 3 years, is trying to help out the state from a complex aortic standpoint. But private practice, so at the same time we do a little bit of everything, all cerebrovascular, peripheral. As you can imagine, there's a lot of cardiologists in my group, so it's fairly busy.
Wow. Awesome. So one thing that also comes up is people talk about, you know, the transition. I know this is sort of, I know most of probably the attendees are residents or fellows about to graduate or looking for jobs now, but in terms of the transition from being a trainee to an attending, and especially when you're going to a place that you're working with residents, you know, how do you make that transition? Do you have any thoughts, or did you have any struggles on your own, or any insight, you know, from your kind of journey to kind of getting through that process?
Is that for anyone?
Yeah, anyone, yeah. So anyone can answer, chime in whenever.
Hey, for me personally, it wasn't, coming to Oklahoma, at least there was nobody that knew me. There was, I came on, everybody thought I knew what I was doing. So there wasn't that transition of going into at least an academic practice where there's a structure and there's a boss and there's another boss and there's levels, and you come in and there's somebody who teaches you. Luckily, there was several guys here that are older that could teach, or at least kind of do some mentoring. But it was really just that first year was try to do good work, take care of patients, and really learn how to operate and maximize efficiency for me in a private practice. Figure out what we were doing, how to do it well, and how to utilize like sort of what we have and what we can do in this practice and in the hospital. So it wasn't, to where you had to try to gain respect of people or, gain approval of the higher ups or so on. We're in private practice, you're your own boss. You're your own you're your own meter of what you're doing, whether it's safe, whether it's not. I mean, because technically you can do whatever you want to do, but the only person that's sort of watching over yourself is you. So it's easier from a private practice to get out and work. It's the thought process of whether you're gonna, what's your ultimate goal that first year, whether you want to, knock out some research, whether you want to become, you want to get good at certain procedures, whether you're going to niche yourself to do certain things. I think it's in a private setting, the biggest thing is to be helpful to your community, and kind of polish up your art that first year.
Yeah, and I think specifically with residents, what I did coming out, I was a 0-5 trainee, is that I told them that if there were other surgeries going on, that might be useful for them to be with the other attendings that were working, just to make sure, going along with what Adele said, that you really want to polish your art. You want to make sure that you're, doing it fine and not relying on your residents as a crutch. So I kind of encourage them actually to stay away from me for the first few months out, just to make sure that, I was kind of holding my own. And then I think being available for, saying yes to pretty much everything. You want to do good surgery. You want to be by the book. You want to have good outcomes, so you make a good name for yourself right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think I remember my first case as an attending, and it was a temporal artery biopsy, and it was the hardest temporal artery biopsy I've ever done. And it's something I've had done in residency multiple times, but the fact that I was the attending, my name was on the consent sheet, it just ramped up my anxiety so much that it took me about an hour to do a temporal artery biopsy. It was one-sided. I think when you're first coming out, it is super important, as Laurel said, to kind of ground yourself, make sure that you're doing good work. But at the same time, also, when you are out of your depth, know that you can ask for help, and it is absolutely okay. I relied a lot on my partner that first year because, this was my first time doing a lot of stuff. Like, there was stuff I had never seen before in my training. And I'm like, how do I handle this? And when you're looking for a job, you want to be in an environment where, number one, you're not by yourself. Number two, your partners don't resent, having to put the energy in to bring you up to where you need to be. It takes about 2 to 3 years, I think, before you feel comfortable in your own skin as an attending vascular surgeon.
Yeah, I think that, going through a surgical residency, you've learned a lot of leadership skills. We all are sort of leaders in the right that we're surgeons. And so when you step into the operating room for the first time, you don't lose that, right? So you have this leadership capability and you're able to run the room. You are still going to be figuring out your own algorithms. You're going to be figuring out what the new equipment is in a new place, what's available, what isn't. And you're going to have a learning curve. That's just the way it is. And it's really important, as mentioned, to have really good mentorship for that. But I think it's also okay for you to be vulnerable in those moments as well, and not try to put on airs and be overly confident and try to overcompensate. I think that's where the danger is if you overcompensate and try to prove that you're some macho surgeon that can handle anything, even though you don't know what's going on, that's when you get into trouble. So, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay in that first couple of years to recognize you're going to be in a learning curve for a little while, and lean on your partners. And residents generally, I found, respect that that's where you're at, and they understand, and they actually learn a lot from the way that you're dealing with becoming a new attending. We'll see how you're dealing with that transition, and we'll respect that.
Yeah, I want to echo what James said. I think humility is huge. If you think you can do everything coming out of training, you just are either crazy, or you are going to find out real quick that that's not the case. Having mentorship with your partners is super important. And I think going in, you know, you want to be confident, but you want to be really nice. And, you know, a lot of the people in the room have been at that institution a lot longer than you. And so being open to their feedback or how they can help, or potentially some, you know, retractor that someone else uses, you know, just being open to being, you know, adapting and flexible in your first year, I think is important. You don't want to come in as a diva. That's a real quick way of making enemies. And then I think talking a little bit about Laura was talking about with the trainees, because I'm at an academic center, I just was really upfront with the trainees saying, you know, I am a new attending, so I haven't operated with you that much. And so it's going to take some time for me to let you do some of the more critical parts of the case. But as we go through cases and I see what you can do, then you'll get to do more. And I kind of told all the seniors, you're going to hate operating with me because I'm not going to let you do as much. And so you may want to just avoid me for the first couple of months, because that's just how it is. I think it's important that at the end of the day, the outcomes fall on you. So you can't just say, oh, I'm going to give all this autonomy to the trainees, because if something bad happens, but you've been practicing for 20 years, no one cares. But if you're a brand new attending and something bad happens, the excuse can't be, well, the trainee did it and it wasn't my fault.
On top of it, the first cases that you're going to be getting when you come fresh out are not going to be these like textbook, picture perfect, super nice and straightforward cases. You're going to get all of the disasters that are inpatient consults. So you really need those outcomes to be good, and you're already fighting an uphill battle because of just the nature that you're getting a little bit of a messier patient to start with.
I love that point about autonomy, because I think particularly as you're coming out of training, one of the things you've probably appreciated the most from attendings is getting autonomy, right? And then you have to realize that you shouldn't be giving the residents autonomy in these cases while you're figuring things out. Like that's definitely a transition that you shouldn't make. So I just echo that. I think that was a really important point.
I don't think you can say enough about the double scrubbing and so on. So it was odd whenever I started double scrubbing my partners, but you know, the first 6 months you're not going to have anything to do. I mean, you have some call stuff, and like Laurel said, the stuff that you get is going to be really tough. So your partners have busy practices, so you jump in with them. If they have a bilateral femoral endart, you take one side, you do the other. That was, I thought, one of the most helpful things. One, it kept repetition and it kept you operating. And then two, you learn a lot of things that, you know, people do things differently, whether it's better or worse. But I took a lot of things that first 6 months of a year that now I do, that I never realized that we were doing it the hard way, or I learned the hard way, and or I'd never realized that you could do that. And then you know, you pick it up and you do it, and it works. So that, like I said, the first 6 months is not super busy. Your clinics are empty. The cases you might have, you know, a couple of cases a week. Just double scrub. They'll get used to it, and it just keeps the reps going.
Yeah, they say you train in a bubble, and I never really understood what that meant until I left the Michigan bubble and realized that, you can never do it this way, or you should never do this. And every one of my partners is doing that, and it's working great. In fact, better than the way that I do it. All of a sudden you're, kind of expanding your toolbox way beyond what you thought you kind of maximized during your residency and fellowship. So definitely. Awesome. One thing that always comes up is those of you who are in private practice, I mean, and this is somewhat relevant to academics as well, but establishing your referral base, like what do you need to do, or how do you do that? And is there something you need to look for in terms of what's in a contract, or in, before you sign, in terms of, what to look for when you are trying to figure out if this is the place for you and how to establish referrals?
Get a contracts lawyer. Wherever you go, find a contracts lawyer in that area. So I started in private practice and then moved to academics. So the things that I wish that I would have done was ensuring that when they told me I had tail coverage, that was in writing, because that comes back to bite you pretty hard. In terms of referrals, it's a lot of like pounding the pavement. You're going out, I sat in a number of primary care and cardiologist office, just the waiting room, waiting to be seen by them. And you feel a little bit like a rep, which I wasn't super psyched on. It felt a little dirty, but you're just really trying to get your name out there. And I basically gave them all my cell phone and my email and said I was happy to see any and all patients that they wanted to send my way. It's a lot of schmoozing, essentially, but contracts, get a lawyer and make sure they cover a tail.
Yeah, I think I agree with Laura. So I didn't get a lawyer or anything for contract. I didn't know kind of how much I was worth just coming out. But luckily, I got lucky that everything from a contract standpoint was, I think the biggest thing, when you go into practice, it really, whether you know if they're busy or not, the best thing up front is to have obviously a guarantee for however many years. That gives you at least some leeway to be able to build a reasonable practice doing what you want to do, rather than just kind of picking up anything that comes along, or being hurtful to others in the practice or in the area. But most hospital-based contracts are pretty much the same across the country. Now, private practice, strictly private practice contracts, which is kind of what Laurel was a part of, and I've heard some nightmares about them. Those are the things where you talk to friends, and a contract lawyer that $1,000 or $500 will get you a long way to help you for some of these things. From building the practice, I thought, just like Laurel said, you go out, you go reps, kind of meeting people. And the funniest thing I found in Oklahoma is people had no clue what vascular surgeons did. There was, I think, 7 vascular surgeons in the entire state when I came on. That was the 7th one. And they had no clue what vascular surgeons did. So, and I thought initially it was a joke. But, as you kind of go through, you figure out that they really have no clue what we do. And you're really educating them on what you did. And then you say, yeah, I'll see anything and everything. And now 5-6 years later, it's kind of biting me in the butt, because now I see anything, and I'm tired of seeing edema. But I told those guys, I'll see lower leg edema 5 years ago, and now you can't say no. The other thing is, you can't really say no. People do things that we don't agree with, as vascular surgeons. There's a lot of specialties that play in the same field, but you are the one that you're the last resort that people call to help. And when they call you, they're calling and just saying, I need help. So whether it's a transfer center, whether it's another cardiologist, interventional radiologist, another vascular surgeon, even if it's somebody down a mile away, I always just say yes. I'll bring them in. We'll figure out what's going on, and deal with it. And that over the last 5 years has been extremely helpful for my practice, because people talk and they say, oh yeah, he took this guy. And eventually you get a couple things that are pretty tough, and then they start sending you their good stuff or the easier things once you develop that relationship with the referral docs. And then the last thing is reps. I think reps have been tremendously helpful in my practice, at least let's say from an aortic and a carotid standpoint. The aortic reps, they see a lot of physicians, they see a lot of aneurysms, and they know what people's skill level is. So they can help shift, certain, I guess, referral patterns in terms of saying, no, maybe you shouldn't be doing it, but there's a guy here that can do this, or there's a guy here that can do that. And they can be very helpful across the board. It's aortic, carotid, peripheral. So reps know a lot of people, and they can be your advocate. And I think they should be really used from that standpoint to build a practice.
I think the other thing is just visibility in the hospital. Also, when you're coming out of training, you want to spend a lot of time there. You want to be in, like, if there's a doctor's lounge or somewhere that they eat lunch, if you're in the OR lounge, just talking to people and really like being present and visible in the hospital, it goes a long way, because when someone's looking for help, you're right there, as opposed to getting on the phone, like trying to figure out who's on call. They'll be like, oh, well, there's a vascular surgeon right there. Like maybe they can come help. And as you build those relationships sitting in the OR lounge or wherever you are, you're going to notice you're going to get a lot that's filtered your way as well, just because of that action.
And one quick thing about contracts, it is very popular to get a sign-on bonus, and sometimes the sign-on bonus can be ridiculous, like $25,000, $50,000, $75,000. Make sure you know where that money is coming from. Most of the time, your sign-on bonus is actually a loan. So you are required to stay there for a certain amount of time in order for the loan to be forgiven. It can be a promissory note. It just, make sure you know where your sign-on bonus is coming from, because nothing is free. Nothing is free. And if you leave the practice, do you have to pay your sign-on bonus back?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing on, depending on the university you're at, they may call it a relocation fund. And just like that, it could be like over 5 years, you have to stay 5 years to get it paid back. But the other thing is, if you choose to take it right when you get there, you then have to pay taxes on that. So think about when you need that cash. So ideally, if you're buying a house or something like that, I think that's when it's sort of best to get that influx of cash, recognizing you're going to have to pay taxes on it. You might want some sort of purchase or something like that that's going to offset that tax liability.
Since James brought up the finance part of things, I would just chime in and say that when you start a new job, it's probably safer to rent, learn the area, make sure you like the job and the job likes you. With real estate transaction costs, etc., breaking even, just selling your house for the same amount is not breaking even. So you need to really be aiming to like 15 or 20% more. Some people can do that in a short period of time, but I would recommend coming out of training, just rent one more year, make sure the job likes you, you like the job, you'll find the area that you want to buy in. It also gives you time to continue to live like a resident and save up a nice down payment. So you don't have to rush into stuff.
Along the lines of contract things, so I know a couple of things were already mentioned, but is there anything that you wish you knew before you signed a contract, or that you wish you kind of factored into a negotiation, or, and how much did you guys negotiate, or how much is too much? What can you ask for? Those are questions that come up all the time.
I think always ask for more. The reality is they're not going to give you more than they can. I know that when I'm in my second job now, and I thought, well, I probably shouldn't get a sign-on bonus because it's my second job and I've already made 2 or 3 years of income, but I asked for it anyway and I got it. And it was very nice because I had a lapse of about 6 weeks between jobs, and it was nice to have the income coming in. But certainly review things, talk to friends. People are often very tight-lipped about finances, but really they shouldn't be. I think you should talk to people directly about money, because it really isn't the be-all and the end-all of our jobs. But you have to have a figure in your mind where when you open an envelope that someone hands to you and it says a number on it, you say, wow, all this hard training was worth it. And if, I talked to one of my ridiculous residents the other day who told me that number was $1 million, which is insane. And he clearly needs a better mentor than I am because I'm steering him astray. But, you have to have a certain number. And going on that, you should always be able to feel comfortable asking for more. No one is going to suddenly say, oh, this, greedy bastard, we're going to not take him because he wants an extra $10,000 sign on. They're going to give it to you if they can. They're going to say no if they can't, and they're going to move on. I remember the person who negotiated my contract, I saw during my interviews, I talked on the phone. Since I've started here at my job in 4.5 years, I've never seen them again. So I had this uncomfortable conversation that I prepped myself for, and I've never once had to come across this same person who I was, so worried to run into, because I was worried he was going to think so differently of me because I was asking for more money. But really just be honest and go for it.
Yeah, I'll add, many of us are not natural negotiators and don't have a ton of business acumen. So this is an area that I really thought was important to buff up on. And I think a really good book about negotiation is a book called Getting to Yes. So read some books and buff up on your negotiation skills. I think one of the keys is there's a lot more than money that matters to your happiness in a given job. And generally, if you take it from the standpoint of how do our goals align? What do I see as the most important piece of the job? What do they see as the most important piece of the job? And as long as you figure out what are the things that will align those two together, what will put me in a place to be successful, you'll be a little bit more successful in getting those pieces of the puzzle. And so thinking about things like, are you going to have an advanced practice provider helping you out? What's your administration admin support going to be? What's your office space going to be? Those sorts of things are sometimes easier for a division chief to get you than getting you X% more on your salary, because particularly in big academic organizations, they have set levels that they're going to bring you in at based on where you are, what the MGMA value is. And I would recommend the AMA, I think, puts out salary levels across the nation. So know what those salary levels are for your region and position, so that you know what your value is based on academic private practice, so that you don't get suckered into a low-paying job. But yeah, I definitely recommend reading some books about it, doing your homework on what your value is, and finding other things that you might need to create a successful environment.
You should also ask the group that you're coming on with if they get paid for call, and then how often they're on call frequency wise, because some people have that in their contracts and they cannot be put on call more than X amount of times per month. And if they go over that, it can be a little added incentive from the salary standpoint. And when you're looking at your worth and the MGMA data, realizing that it's probably going to take you at least 2 to 3 years before you're actually like breaking even, because oftentimes, like if you have an MA, that's factored into your salary, health insurance, those things are big. And that's kind of the other reason that you always want to say yes, is that you gotta bulk up some of your RVUs, especially in the first couple of years, especially if you plan on renegotiating your contract on the line.
Yeah, I think along the lines of what you were saying about it's, not just the financial side of things, other things that you can think about negotiating is some protected time, or even if it's like an allocation of like, I want an account with some money in it so that I can host, recruitment events for medical students. I want to, I have these kind of ideas in mind. I need this and this resource for it. So that's important. And if you're like me, words just don't roll off your tongue where he's like asking for things. It feels uncomfortable. And so I think there's a lot of value in just practicing like the phrase you're going to say and how you're going to say it, so you don't sound like word vomit awkwardness on the phone or Zoom or in person, and just kind of have a sense for, so it rolls off your tongue a little bit easier.
I don't know about the rest of the panel, but I wouldn't get too discouraged if you don't get what you want. I asked for several things in my first contract, and it was like, nope. I didn't get really anything that I negotiated for. My second job post-training, I felt like I had a lot of leverage. I could produce some numbers that I, put up for the past few years, and RVUs. And I felt like my second contract, I had a lot more success negotiating because I had some data behind it that could back up, my worth.
Yeah, having multiple offers also helps. So diversifying your opportunities is key. Sometimes you'll find that you're negotiating from a soft position, like, okay, I don't really care if I get this, but I'd like this, versus a hard position where this is something where if I don't get this, I do not want this job. And you'll find that, if you're willing to say, look, if you don't give me this, this is not the job for me because our goals aren't aligned. You'll find that people, if they really want you, they'll move things, do whatever it takes to do that. I was really surprised at some places where I was like, well, this is clearly not the place for me, unless you change this aspect of the job, which originally they said was a fundamental component. And I said, no, it's not going to work. And they call me back 2 weeks later and say, okay, we figured it out. You don't have to do that. So, but you have to know, you can't use the hard positions for everything. You have to know what is a deal breaker for you, and really use that sparingly.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, oh man, I just totally lost my train of thought. You had something real good there. I'll think of it. I see a couple other people logged on and a couple logged off, but feel free if you guys have any kind of, we'll probably wrap up in the next 10 minutes, but if you have any questions, to type them in the Q&A. Oh, what I was going to say was, once you have a contract in hand, it means that they like you enough to give you a contract. So having the mindset of, I was always afraid, what if I ask for this and they're like, oh my gosh, this greedy person, we're gonna retract that contract. We don't want her. That's not the case. At that point, they want to try to work towards something to make it work for you. So it's, make sure that, recognize that you're valued, and you have value, and that when you have a contract in your hand, it's because they are interested in possibly coming to some kind of agreement with you. So asking for those things that really mean a lot to you, is a good idea.
I'll go back to something that Adele said about reps. I think that the device reps are an invaluable resource in your everyday life. They really have such a value add. But when you're looking for jobs, they're a huge resource. And I would, if you're thinking of a certain geographic region, I would rely on some of your, let's say, your favorite reps, get in touch with their friends, their colleagues, and ask about programs. You'll get so much granularity in terms of information about different programs, different groups, who's coming, who's going, jobs that haven't even been listed yet, which group is failing, which group, really needs to hire, kind of a group that you want to do aortic surgery with only one person does aortic surgery, and this is the person, and you won't be able to compete with them. All of these things you'll find out, and really rely on them. They'll put you in touch with people. They want you to be successful, because when you're successful, they're successful. And certainly they are of the mindset that if they kind of hook you up into a job, you're more likely to use their devices, which is fantastic for them. But really lean heavily on them. I think they're way more adept at kind of the business salesy aspect of what we do, where most of us, including myself, are very bad at that. And the more you kind of lean on them, the more information you'll get. And don't be afraid to kind of cold call people. If the job isn't listed, certainly reaching out to someone and saying, hi, I heard you might be hiring. Worst case scenarios, they say no. Generally, they say, well, we're in consideration. I'll keep your resume around. And if we list something, I'll let you know. But they're really a huge resource.
Yeah, in relation to the job search that Nathan was just talking about, I tell our trainees to start drafting or really even thinking what kind of job they want, and also drafting a letter of intent of what kind of job they're looking for, really before VAM of their second to final year of training. So like your first year fellowship around April, or your junior chief year around April. If you can send those out, yes, it's very early. Yes, a lot of jobs aren't posted, but depending on an institution, and they may know that a job is coming up, or if they look at your CV and your letter of intent, they may just say, wow, this is a great applicant, and they can make a job for you. So don't think that you only can apply to jobs that are posted on the SVS website. I would say that's usually they're posting once they already have someone.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I also found it helpful, you don't want to be too job obsessed, but in your second to last year, the year before you're going to be looking for a job, just follow the SVS career board so you kind of understand the flow of how jobs come out. There's sort of a natural waves that these jobs come out. And it's valuable to know that. It's also valuable to know if a job was on the market last year and hasn't been filled, there may be a reason for that. So start looking at that job board early, get into a habit of taking a look at it, and you'll get a sense of the natural flow. And then you may not be as anxious ridden if you haven't gotten a job by, April.
I'll tell you, I took a little bit of an opposite approach, and it's just how I am, a little bit late on everything. Right around VAM, everybody starts talking about jobs. And then right around the MORE course, everybody really starts talking about jobs and throwing their names out there and doing all these little secretive meetings and so on. And it gets to be a little stressful. Then, the next meeting, it's really serious. People are really talking about jobs and what they got and, trying to be done by the end of the year. And I just ignored it because I didn't hear of anything that I liked. And there was about 3 or 4 of us that just kind of ignored a lot of this stuff and just kept on going our lives and just kept, going through fellowship, going to meetings or so on. And so I didn't really start getting serious about looking at a job until it's probably March, which is definitely late. But the good thing is the candidate pool was down to about 10, 15 of us for whatever jobs were either left or new jobs that came up. So it was a lot less stressful. There was, I knew kind of what else for. It wasn't, an academic job where I think academics, you probably have to get there a little early, but it's not end all be all if you're not, done with your job search by VESS or by VESS. There's new jobs that pop up, things happen in practices, things change. So it's not the end of the world if it's, March or because most people truthfully don't start the new job until August, September. You graduate, you take a month or so off. So it's not, the right thing is to find the right job and be realistic with yourself. But the rush really gets to you because everybody talks about the job and who they talk to and what they're talking about and who, is interested in them. That you can leave it to the side and just kind of do your own thing and not be overly stressed about it.
One caveat to that, playing devil's advocate to the procrastinator, Adele, is that the one thing that will be impacted by that is your insurance coverage. And you need to look at like medical board timing. Like my first job was in Louisiana. Let me tell you, Louisiana, as Adele knows, is like not known for being punctual or expeditious in any form or fashion. So it took, I signed my contract right before New Year's, which I'd say I was like on an earlier side basically, but I didn't have some payers coverage until like October of that year. So keep in mind like what state you're joining, because that definitely plays a factor, because if you're in one of these like slow states, you don't sign till March or April and you don't have some of your licensure and payer stuff, you're going to be only doing inpatients for quite a while, which isn't a bad thing, but having that realistic expectation that you might only be dealing with inpatients for a while if you're on that later time frame, which is fine.
One of our panelists our final panelist was able to join. We'll just, we'll give Dr. Asmussen just a second to introduce himself. Tell us about how you got to where you are, any particular interest in vascular surgery, and, any insight you have on the job search process. We'll just let you talk for a little bit.
Well, that's always dangerous. Thank you for letting me join the group. I'm sorry I'm a little late. So I'm at the Mayo Clinic now. I had a long career in the Air Force, so my path is certainly different than most, if not everyone, on the line, if not everyone in the country. But so I had a long military career. I trained at Mayo. I did a general surgery residency in Texas with the Air Force, and my professional career was heavily influenced by my active duty time, which was great. It was very different than what I expected. I do think, I try to talk to our trainees and junior faculty here at Mayo about, it's good to try to control your circumstances. I think we all have to set goals, and you definitely want to be intentional about what you want to do. But if my career taught me anything, it's about flexibility, because you often can't predict some of the things, and you can't control some of the things that impact your career. So we can talk about that later or more if people are interested. Yeah, so here I'm I'm a consultant in vascular surgery. I'm the vice chair of education for our Department of Surgery. So we have about 150 surgical trainees at Mayo Clinic in Rochester across all of our 9 divisions. And so, I'm in vascular surgery, but spend a lot of time with, trainees and junior faculty in other specialties. About the job search, I caught the last end of that. I think those words that you heard are all wise. I try to, someone, maybe as Adele said, it's more about the right job than the first job. The right fit. We use the word fit a lot. I think saying we got to find something that is the right fit is sort of a disarming term for, that a fit can mean salary, it can mean location, it can mean your partner's, proximity to family, it can mean the partners at the practice, they have to be the right fit. So finding the right fit, I think, and the right job is better than finding an early job. Although, the comments that, were made about licensing and practice planning are certainly part of fit. I try to tell our trainees, don't get jumpy. They get, we're, naturally and understandably, with conversations that are going on around the country that, it's understandable that to try to find something quick, but I think, don't get jumpy. There's a lot of jobs out there. Rely on your relationships that you have established, that you're establishing in your practice or your training program. And, the right job will come available for sure. So I'll stop there so I don't ramble too much, but look forward to questions or further discussion and learning from the group.
I have to run, but if anyone wants to contact me, I'm happy to answer questions or give any advice. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we've been over the last sort of hour or so just talking about for those trainees that are looking to find a job or switch jobs, for those are in early career, we've kind of covered topics, how to negotiate, should you negotiate, what should you negotiate, how do you choose academic versus private practice. I know you have a military background. Be interesting to hear a little bit about where you came to where you are from that.
Sure. I think that another thing that sort of comes to mind, and I think this has just been part of, is phase your career. I think be willing to have different phases. Don't try to, you guys, we can do it all, we just can't do it all at the same time. And I think being patient with a career is important. I think right out of the gate, the most important things for that I think and have seen is to get your clinical feet on the ground. Just be a good doctor and a good surgeon, and all of you guys and people on the line in the VESS and all, that you'll be great surgeons. Make sure you're clinically rooted your first few years out. I see a lot of young trainees who say, well, I've got to get out and I want to do research and I want to do education and I want to do some committee work. And it's often a time when you're busy with your family. You're finally not in training. You're finally out of the match, and recognize that research or academic work can come later. You can do education work, training, program director stuff later. But it all really is, in my view, built on having a strong foundation clinically. Really get your dig in and try to do 200, 300, 400 cases that first year. Really, don't get distracted by other things, because the rest of your career is going to be founded on comfort in the OR, credibility among your partners, credibility with patients, and really that comes from being a good surgeon. And I've seen a few, and even been prone to it myself, your first couple of years out, you're like, well, I got to write, I got to publish. I'm kind of interested in being a program director. I need to get a teaching award. You know, and I think the people, talented people on the line, the talented people in our societies can do all those things, and they will do them all over their career. Just don't try to do them all in the first 2 or 3 years, you know, because it's too much, right? And you want to, what I have a perspective of now is a 20, 25 year career. And what I realize is that, you know, I have done all of that actually, but fortunately, you know, it's sort of been phased. You know, I've had periods where I've been heavy into research and innovation, heavy in education, heavy in clinical work. And I think, you know, trying to phase that or pace that so that you maintain your personal health and well-being, maintain relationships, you know, those are the things that are lasting. And so I think sort of being willing to phase a career has always been relevant to me as I look back. Yeah, in my military career, you know, I was I had basically a health profession scholarship to med school, which I had not done ROTC, had not done military prior to med school, and that was just a way really for me to. At the time, I was single and adventuresome, and facing a private medical school tuition, and you know, applying for the military scholarship made sense, and that's really what got me into that military service. And then along the way, I started, as we all do, you know, you meet mentors and people you'd like to emulate along the way, and you know, that got me into surgery and then vascular surgery. And it turns out that, you know, of all the military specialties, vascular surgery is really appealing to the military and injured service members, because nobody understands bleeding and bleeding control like people on the line. And so when the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan started and really got into their peak, I was very, you know, people like us were very much in need. And so that provided a ton of professional opportunity for me, whether it was clinical or travel around the world or research. So that's sort of my, you know, I mean, my military career is largely heavily influenced by the Afghanistan and Iraq wars and deployments. But again, you know, now here I am, and now I love the practice now. I'm doing age-related vascular surgery in a civilian place. And, you know, I kind of wanted to always to do that. And eventually I got around to it. So, you know, back to being willing to phase your career and being patient with each phase, and not trying to do too much at once. You know, we're all guilty of that, you know. I think that phrase came to me. Does anybody on the line know Darren Klaus? I should not give him up, but Darren's the chief at UVA, and he was an Air Force partner. Very animated guy, talented surgeon, very, very dedicated. And he would get frustrated and he'd say, damn it, you know, I can do it all. I just can't do it all at the same time, you know, when he was trying to do everything, you know, publish, operate, deploy, be a father, be a husband, you know, be a decent human. And it's a lot. And I think, again, trying to spread that out and be patient for different career phases is important. I think you also remember, you know, to me, relationships in your training and your partners, that's, you know, a lot of that, those also are very lasting. The people you're fellows with, or you may not have to tell this group that, but, you know, maintaining those relationships, those contacts are also what will help you sustain. I mean, I bring up Darren Klaus. I mean, I've been sort of I wasn't fellows with him, but I was basically a resident with him. And people like that are lifetime contacts and friends that, you know, you want to preserve and lean on for, whether it's job advice, career advice, you know, recognize those people now early in your career and build those relationships too.
I think that's actually a really nice kind of way to wrap up. If you think about, you know, that the vascular surgery world is a small world. It's so interconnected, and you know, as you go through looking for jobs, you just remember, you know, your integrity is everything. You want to be honest. You want to set a good, you know, you want to make sure you're being honest with the job search. You want to make sure, because if you're going to switch jobs, you never know which people are going to be the ones that are going to be the gatekeepers or the ones that are going to recommend you to somebody else. And so I think, I think that's one of the most important things, but kind of follow your heart, make a list of all the things that are your priorities. What is the number one thing that you're looking for? If you have a partner, have them make a list of their priorities, figure out which of your options kind of incorporate the most of those things, which the deal breakers, what are the must-haves. And like, Dr. Rasmussen was saying, it's not you can always change jobs. It's not you have to pick the perfect job and that's the job and you're stuck with that. If it doesn't work out, you can always, your interests are going to change. So I think that this was a really helpful session here, and this is going to be, it's recorded, it's going to be made available for the trainees that weren't able to make it. Of course, we made it Eastern time, 7:30. So those people in the OR at 4:30 p.m. and on the West Coast. So hopefully people are able to watch it. And if everyone's okay with this, we'll send everyone, all the panelists here, the contact information out. So if any VESS members or anyone wants to follow up or send any emails, we'd be happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, I put my email out there on the thing. I'm happy to, I'm sorry I'm late joining. I thought it was 7:15 Central. But,
I think you were not alone.
I
sorry.
did too.
I love your comment about candid, being candid or genuine in your interviews. That, I think, the closer you get to a job, and I found this after 20 some years, interviewing, frankly, for this job, you find things coming out of your mouth that in the interview, right, that you're like, this is truly me, because when you're interviewing, that's no time to. It needs to really be genuine, because these are a lot on the line. I like people, I tell my patients this sometimes, I like to under promise and over deliver, and I think that's not a bad way to do it. I think the opposite of that is, trying to oversell yourself in areas where you might not be expert, or you might not be comfortable. I think I think that's where you will be, candor, you'll find it, and clarity as you interview. Anyway. Well, I'd be happy to talk more or be in contact with anybody. I commend you guys for doing this, and hopefully it's useful, and happy to help out or support in any way.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to do this for us. So I'm sure we'll see each other at the next VESS meeting, maybe.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Yeah,
Have a
good night. See you later.
Cheers.